what would you say is a common misunderstanding about equity and justice in schools today? A misunderstanding, a misapplication, uh, an ideological blockage. And I wonder if you could talk about, maybe just in general, but also maybe in terms of your book, uh, what are the deeper understandings that people need in order to get to solutions, transformations, reimaginings that are truly going to uh, make a difference rather than being more performative or mitigative? Anyone can feel free to jump in.
I'll jump in first.
Yeah.
I love this question because I think those of us who are teacher educators hear a lot of these kind of misconceptions all the time, and we do our best to battle them. And for me, one of the most important misunderstandings in the world of educational equity is that a strong principle is enough to make an inequitable schooling system equitable. Right? We know and we accept that students need individualized educational approaches, but for some reason, we still think that teachers can benefit from a one-size-fits-all principle. So my book does explore in a couple chapters different leadership styles in the context of other school factors like the climate, community partnerships, onboarding processes, so that teachers can best assess if and to what extent they can be successful in a particular school, right? Because like a transformative leader may be great for some, right? But others like myself may benefit more from a more behavioristic approach or a transactional leader who has clear and consistent expectations, there are rewards, there's consequences for performance. So I guess in all, just like students need different types of support, so do teachers. And my book pushes teachers to think through what they need to be their best teacher selves. And I guess I'm basically saying that it's okay to think about yourself and not just your students when you think about equity.
I'll jump in and talk about teachers specifically. So I think in both of the books that I've co-authored for this series, we're really clear about the fact that just having more diverse representation is not it. Like, that is not equity and justice. If you have the founding fathers and then you add Betsy Ross, like, that is not making sure that you are including women in any sort of meaningful way. In Social Studies for a Better World, we identify 4 problematics, which we describe as things that teachers commonly do when they think they're trying to be more inclusive and teaching for justice, but are actually just reinforcing the status quo, and then we offer solutions for them to do better. And we try to be really honest about the fact that we too have made a lot of these mistakes. In fact, we identify some of those mistakes very specifically, and we're like, this is terrible, we should not do that, and please don't do this if you're doing it too. But we have one chapter on what we describe as heroification, where, for example, during the civil rights movement, we always highlight Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and then at the elementary level, Ruby Bridges. And the focus is on individuals all the time and how there are these incredible people who did amazing things, which studies have shown can be really intimidating to children when you're simply highlighting the incredible actions and bravery of a single individual. But also, if we're talking about the civil rights movement, why are we ignoring the movement and the fact that it's about mobilizing people for the common good? And so we really try to highlight things that teachers are doing out of great intentions, but the impact is still harmful. The impact is still not actually shifting the dominant narratives that we teach and that we instill in students, sometimes not necessarily through the curriculum, but through the ways that we address them. If we say, okay, we're going to line up now, boys and girls, I need boys over here, girls over here, that's still norming 2 ways of being in terms of gender, right? And so we try to give as many clear examples of that as possible in that book. And then similarly, in Teaching Asian America, we are not saying you need to just add an Asian face or just bring in this Asian biography, and then you will have your diverse set of historical figures, and now you've achieved equity. We have to think about, again, these common narratives that are taking place in classrooms. So is it all about meritocracy and the American dream and the US is the land of opportunity? Or are we thinking about the ways that in in order to benefit capitalist enterprises, particular groups were brought to the United States because they were easy to exploit. And then as soon as they were no longer needed for their labor, they were no longer viewed as desirable and excluded, like the Chinese in the 1800s, right? And so we really try to outline ways that, okay, we know you're trying, but we're not actually shifting the narrative or disrupting the narrative in any meaningful way. And so we try to offer solutions that will do those things.
I'd like to build on that. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. What I think is something that both my book challenges and that is I find to be a frustrating aspect, especially of when I go to like conferences or whatever and I see teachers there, is this sort of an understandable but limiting belief that there's going to be like an end. Like if you do this for like I've gotten to the end of the equity or anti-racism or whatever it is, right? And you know, I did that, I can move on. I think we all know, and anyone watching this is going to understand that a quick fix isn't good, but still like even just like, and then you're finished is part of the issue, right? So in my book, I tried to look, the book has to end, right? The chapters have to end. But like, I really didn't want to give people the impression that even if you try all of the things in the book, and there are a lot of things in there, you're going to be done. It's pointing towards the start of what I hope for the teachers who read it and want to do better is going to be a basically endless iterative process. And if you aren't up for that, then frankly, you're not going to be able to support the people who are being excluded or oppressed or whichever we'd like to say. So go ahead, Jenna.
No, thank you. I just was thinking about the myth that if we talk about race that we cause guilt and shame. And I think what we try to say in our book is it's not talking about race that causes guilt and shame, particularly for white kids. And that building on what you said, Noreen, most students that we interviewed, the first time they heard the term white was when in kindergarten they learned a white person shot Dr. King, right? But they've never heard the term white or whiteness prior to that. So we really want to think about not in terms of whitewashing history in any way, but how can we name whiteness outside of the context of oppressor and oppressed, and how are students of color seeing themselves outside of that paradigm as well? And thinking about how do we model white anti-racism for white students? How do we offer examples of white anti-racist? How do we show cross-racial solidarity? Where are we teaching that, making it explicit? And so that we're seeing multiple ways of being white and not just talking about whiteness within that context of oppressor and oppressed. So hoping that the more we talk about race, the less guilt and shame kids are feeling instead of we're only talking about it in that context.
Anyone else want to jump in on this one? Another question. Well, one thing I just want to mention here is one thing that I think is amazing about well, really all the books in the series is this there's directness and naming the things that need to be named, but there's also and most of the books, at least, I think all the books to some extent, a kind of humility and self-reflection, so that as authors, you're kind of, in a way, aligning yourself with the readers. Like I've tripped over myself too, and here's how I've tripped over myself. And I think that's such a great way to kind of establish connection, so it doesn't feel like I am the expert on high and I'm gracing you with this piece of expertise. It's like, you know, we're all to some extent tripping over ourselves, sometimes trying to figure our way through the equity and justice thing. And I really value that about the books in the series.